Coming up on this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society, we max out our intelligence stat to determine the best Nintendo RPG hero of all time. It's dangerous to go alone, so the Nintendo Cartridge Society goes with you. Welcome to Nintendo Cartridge Society. My name is Patrick Ellers, and I am joined, as I am always joined, by my co-host, Mark Mitchell. How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing great. Patrick, I'm prepared to tell you what this week's streaming Broadway show is, but before I do that, I have to tell you that I think this is the last time we should talk about it. Because
Oh no.
Well, here's the deal. Is it the show that they're streaming is the NBC live musical of Hairspray, which
Right. Oh, okay.
I like Hairspray.
Fine, yeah.
I think it's a fun show. But for whatever reason, this is this feels even more desperate than The Sound of Music.
Yeah, totally.
And so it's I think I've lost all enthusiasm for quarantine theater. I think so.
Wow. This is the end of an era. I mean, I know people have thanked us for pointing them in the direction of these Andrew Lloyd Webber, and now they're not even his, but he's hosting them, these live streamed musicals, and now we're just turning our backs on them.
Look, I
just
feel
like you turned your back on Animal Crossing.
I feel like the shows, actually, maybe that's it. Maybe I'm the fickle one.
Maybe you might be. The shows, what were you saying?
Well, I was just going to say, the shows, there's something about, the Andrew Lloyd Webber ones, for the most part, were, live, filmed theater. And then there's something about it being, staged for TV that it's just not the same to me. Can I tell you, though, how familiar are you with the musical Hairspray?
Pretty familiar with it, yeah.
Okay.
Sarah and I just watched it a couple weeks ago, but I'd seen it. I saw it when it came out in the theater. When I was living in Hawaii and super bored, my roommate and I did a double feature of that and Stardust.
Wow, Stardust. I haven't thought about that for a long time. But you know the song I Can Hear the Bells?
Yeah.
That Tracy sings. Actually, I guess this is a little spoilery for Game of Thrones, so if you haven't watched it yet, don't. But I've always thought that there would be a perfect mashup of that song and then the scene from the final season of Game of Thrones where Daenerys is on the dragon. She hears the bells.
She just sit on the dragon and she goes, I can hear the bells.
Exactly, yeah. And it's all because he kissed her. It's I don't know. It just felt like a little bit perfect to me.
Well, God willing, someone will put that together and it won't be us. Speaking of things that we're not going to put together, this is maybe my worst of these transitions ever. My copy of Sonic Forces. Would you like to borrow it? You can. Mark, I'm thinking sometime next week I'm going to venture out of the post office and continue.
So
I know.
Exciting. After a long hiatus, we're pulling it as Sir Andy. We are being like Andrew Lloyd Webber, and we're I'm declaring we've reached the limits of what the Sonic Forces borrowing program can be
you threw
put
me
on
when
hold
you
for.
called him Sir. He's a lord, no?
Well,
are lords also sirs?
Well, I mean, he's knighted. I'm pretty sure he's a sir. I think he's a sir.
Okay.
Oh, wait, actually,
all
no,
right.
Maybe I'm wrong. I'll look this up. You talk about Sonic Forces, I'll look this up.
All right, great. If you would like to borrow my copy of Sonic Forces for the Nintendo Switch, all you got to do is email us at Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com and give me a mailing address where I can brave the post office to send you my copy of this game. You play it for as long as you want, and then you send it back. It doesn't cost you anything. It costs me about $11, but it's okay. If you want to buy the game for yourself, it's $10 on the eShop right now. Again, I'm not telling you how to spend your money or what to do. You want to borrow my copy? You should. That's the way to go. Mark, do you have closure on this?
I know that he is in fact Sir Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Well, there we go. I retract my confusion from before.
I am genuinely excited to hear that the Sonic Forces borrowing program is on the cusp of returning. It was a perfect program in hiatus, but it is an even more perfect program in practice.
Yes. 100%. I mean, I think we can all agree that a program is better when it is functioning, and that's exactly what we propose to do. That's the Nintendo Cartridge Society guarantee that eventually all of our programs will function. All right, Mark. Speaking of things that need to function, let's get into the topic of the week. This is a continuation, a part 2, if you will, because last week we just determined the best Nintendo heroes from RPG franchises, but we didn't rank them. We just picked out the best ones from each franchise. And you know us, we like to assign numbers to things. We want to know objectively and definitively which one is the best, which one is the second best, and so on, until second worst and worst. So that is the task that we have given ourselves today. Mark, how are you feeling going into this?
So I've got to tell you, I'm a little bit nervous about a couple of these picks and where they're going to shake out, because I think they throw some interesting loops into like our normal processes. But let's go ahead and run down the franchises and the champions representing them, so we know who we're pitting against each other.
Sure, let's go back and forth on this.
All right. So starting with Paper Mario, the champion is, of course, Paper Mario.
And then representing the Mario and Luigi series, this one's maybe a little bit of a cheat. It is Mario and Luigi.
Representing the Super Mario RPG is Mallow.
And representing the Pokemon mainline series, it's Pikachu.
Representing Pokemon Mystery Dungeon with no commentary is Patrick and Mark as a Mudkip.
Representing the Earthbound or Mother series, it's Ness from Mother 2.
Representing
Earthbound.
Representing Fire Emblem is Edelgard from Fire Emblem Three Houses.
Representing Golden Sun is Matthew from Golden Sun Dark Dawn.
Representing the Advance Wars series is Andy, star of the first few Advance Wars games.
And representing Xenoblade is Shulk from Xenoblade Chronicles. Mark, we have an email that we need to address before we go any further in this process. Carter wrote into us, just like anyone can, by emailing us at Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com. And he writes, Dear Patrick and Mark, I would like to preface this email with an admission of the fact that I'm still a little salty with the unjust loss of my entry of Gerudo Valley during the music ranking episode. However, I have come to redeem myself by suggesting an extraordinarily obscure Nintendo RPG that you missed. Pokemon Conquest for the Nintendo DS is a tactical RPG set in feudal Japan if feudal Japan had Pokemon and was very anime-esque. This game is one of my favorites, and I hope you consider this hidden gem from a bygone era of Pokemon. Literally any character from this game would make a good candidate, but I personally suggest Oichi and or her Jigglypuff companion. Thanks for all the great content, Carter.
Oh my gosh, this is amazing. I'm looking it up right now. I had no idea this existed. It was developed by Tecmo Koei.
Yeah, wild, right? This is also a game that I was not at all familiar with. But it seems why isn't tactical role-playing game a genre that Pokemon why isn't just conquered that? Like, you make a Fire Emblem but it's Pokemon instead of like dudes with swords? Holy cow.
Yeah, this is such a good idea. I am embarrassed that I didn't know this existed, because I love the idea of like, yeah, like what does feudal Japan look like in a world where Pokemon exist? That is like, I want to know. I desperately want to know.
So the question then becomes, who do we include from this game? And I mean, we are obviously at a little bit of a disadvantage here, not knowing the characters personally. But I think we can take Carter's suggestion and use Oichi and her partner Pokemon, the Jigglypuff.
Yeah, I think we've got to.
Okay, so she seems cool. She's like kind of dressed in the light pinks and blues to match her Jigglypuff. What else would you say about her?
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know
this
anything about
reaching.
this character. Like, I can say nice things about Jigglypuff. Like, I can say the Jigglypuff, right? Like, made it thanks to friend of the show, Richie Root. Jigglypuff made it very far in our ranking of the best Smash Brother character of all time. On the strength of, I can't even remember what, Richie just really loved Jigglypuff in Smash.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and he made a semi-compelling argument frequently to keep the Jigglypuff towards the top of the field. So I think that's going to, the character of the Jigglypuff is going to have to carry us a lot here. From the Bulbapedia entry for Oichi, it says that all this stuff happens, and then she wishes to stay by the player's side and pledges her service. Must be taken into battles that involve the hero battling opponent warlords or for their kingdoms. So it sounds like she's probably a loyal soldier, fights by your side no matter what. She is a sweet, kind-hearted girl who is not without strength and resolve. By nature, she is not drawn to battle, but nonetheless learn to embrace it when necessary. I think that's enough for us to include her in this ranking, don't you?
Yeah, at this point, I probably know more about her than I do Andy.
Okay, all right. So Oichi and her partner Pokemon, the Jigglypuff, have now entered the list.
And of course, if you are wondering how we came to some of these determinations, like Patrick and Mark representing Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, or why we ended up going with Matthew for Golden Sun, definitely check out our episode from last week. Kind of important context before we get started here.
Sure. Or, just dive right in, like, look, man, we've all seen individual episodes of, a TV show before having seen all the episodes that came previous. You catch up, you pick up on the context. It's not that hard. Mark, do you have is there anything obvious here to you? Like an obvious top or an obvious bottom, someone that you really like, someone that you really don't like?
Well, can I tell you that one of the things that in leading up to this episode that I've kind of struggled with is I don't know what to do about Patrick and Mark as a Mudkip.
Yeah, it's a tough one because we're doing a little self insert here, right? Like, but that is the character in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. It is one of you it is you, the player, as a Pokemon. And so we had to make a decision somewhere, and so we combine ourselves into one person. And then that one person into a Mudkip.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess I feel like where I struggle is like, do I like you and me more than I like Mallow? Like, yeah, of course I do. Mm-hmm. Do I like you and me more than I like Ness? Yeah, I mean, I like you and me quite a bit. So do you see, like, that's right. Where, like, the struggle is that, like...
Yeah, I get you.
So I almost, like, do we have to acknowledge, and I'm not saying this is what we should do, but do we have to acknowledge that we made this choice, but then also, like, take us out of the running?
I mean, that is a great point. Who did we cast ourselves as when we were doing musicals? Velma and Roxy?
No, possibly. Somebody, we also in Frozen, right? We cast ourselves.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. We were on Elsa.
Yeah.
I believe. And it was maybe like double cast, so we would like
yes,
alternate nights.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, so I think it is right for us to say that it is unfair because look, I know me personally. I know you personally. The show wouldn't exist without you and me personally. So I think you're right. The Patrick and Mark as Mudkip has an unfair advantage and should possibly be removed from the running.
Yeah, I think we can enshrine it in its own like separate category. Yes. Its own separate ranking of 1.
Everyone else needs to compare themselves to the other characters. The Mudkip that is you and me together need not concern itself.
Other than that, I don't really have any like early favorites for Frontrunner here, or anybody that I really like hate that much.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is tough because there's a lot of middle of the road sort of characterization here, and like it's maybe also difficult because we have Mario and Luigi in here, Paper Mario and Mario and Luigi in here, and you know I've been playing a lot of Bowser's Inside Story, and you know it is charming every time the Mario brothers talk to each other in that game because the game doesn't give them dialogue, right? But it will just make them go like to the other characters or to each other. But they're not really characters, you know? And they seem to be they are very much lacking the kind of fun and like joy of motion that I associate with Mario and Luigi, you know? One of my greatest joys in life is picking up a Nintendo controller and making Mario run around. And you don't really get to do that in a Mario and Luigi game.
That's a really interesting point because like there is more of that in Paper Mario, but Paper Mario is still a little bit of just like a blank character, right? Like the interesting the richness of that world is from like the sidekicks or like the people that you meet, the other NPCs. It's not that like Paper Mario himself is super interesting, which actually that kind of makes me like using that as kind of the lens that we're approaching this. Like I feel like it maybe makes Edelgard a kind of early front runner.
Yeah,
because she is so like richly characterized.
Yeah, and so I do sort of think that is the route that we should take here because, again, these are role-playing games, right? So we are trying to determine which character is the best, not who has the highest stats or, you know, like this isn't determining the best starter Pokemon or the best Smash fighter. We are determining them on the strength of their character, right? And I think that you're right that Edelgard comes out to an early lead there. I think that also means that Mallow is in an early leadership position simply because he has a character arc. He thinks he is one thing, discovers he is something else, achieves his goal, right? Like finds the place where he belongs and then chooses to go with Mario to complete his quest anyway. You know, when we were talking about who we were going to choose from Super Mario RPG, I was briefly making the case for Gino and saying that like, you know, his quest to defeat Smithy is like the main quest, like that's his life's work, and that's like the goal that Mario takes up. But Mallow just does it to help his friends. Like he's achieved all of his ends, but his strength of character is so strong that he continues on that quest simply to help his friends and save the kingdom.
Yeah, I really like this. And so I feel like Mallow, Mallow, Edelgard, and I would put maybe Shulk up here as well. So the way that Shulk is described is like determined, strong-hearted, kind, quick-witted, you know, like, and I think those are all, they make them like, that's what makes the characters that we've been talking about so far like so much more dynamic than you know like a Paper Mario or a Mario and Luigi, is that they do have, because like even like Ness, right, falls into this like silent protagonist. So you know, like at this point, is Ness maybe more iconic than, you know, like a Shulk or an Edelgard or something? Like because he's been in Smash for so long, but like as an actual character, right, like they're just that it's one of the good things about RPGs, but also like when you're doing one of these like things where you're talking about characters, like the empty vessel that allows you to like project yourself onto that character is also kind of like the downfall of a lot of these.
And I think for that reason, we also need to elevate Andy from Advance Wars a little bit, because he is not a Cypher. Like, he has a personality. He is enthusiastic. He likes machines, and like, you know, has like a boyish quality to him in a game that is not really about like childish characters. Like, it's a war game, and here's this like kid, right? Like a hotshot mechanic that is like commanding part of the army.
Yeah, that's a really great point. So maybe that's like potentially that's a place for us to start, is just kind of like these two broader tiers of characters, like ones that you can just kind of like there's a little bit more to them than that just kind of like silent protagonist.
Sure. I mean, I think what that boils down to is that we want to sort of separate the characters from the ciphers, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So let's go down the list and determine who's a character, who's a cipher.
Okay.
So Paper Mario.
Yeah, I think we're calling that one a cipher. Which, like, look, like, I guess we'll get into it, but like Paper Mario and Luigi, like, part of the reason that you were saying, like, Mario and Luigi, it's really cute to see them together, even though they're not like, they don't have dialogue or anything, is because it's still Mario. It's still like Mario and Luigi. So you have a lot of like emotion. I, at least anyways, have a lot of emotion tied up in those characters, no matter kind of like, you know, like if they are silent. Mario isn't that talkative anyways. So I think that will give him maybe an advantage when we get down to it, but it's still a cipher for sure.
Yeah, I think they're ciphers, but they're perhaps very good ciphers. Mario and Luigi also going in the cipher category.
Mm-hmm. So next we have Mallow from Super Mario RPG, and I think we've decided that this is going into like the, what are we calling it, like character?
Yeah, character versus cipher. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Mallow's a character. He has wants, he has desires, he has disappointments. Pikachu.
So Pikachu is expressive, right? Like,
yes.
And I assume we're like, we're not saying like Pikachu the, what would you say, like species, or like Pikachu the type of Pokemon. It's like a very specific Pikachu, like the Pikachu.
I mean, if it is, it's hard for us to consider the Pikachu like the Pikachu from the anime. Like, that's almost a different thing entirely. And then shouldn't we have picked Ash?
Right. But we didn't. And
Pikachu may occupy an in-between area.
Yeah, I think I vote that we put him in character, and maybe Pikachu turns out to be like low character, right? Like kind of like middle tier, butting up with Paper Mario or something. But
sure,
I think he's got enough personality to like make it up there. Okay. So next we're doing Pokemon Conquest. Is this where we should slot them in?
Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. And so I think Oichi and Jigglypuff fall under the character category.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps a little difficult because we don't know the character, but that's okay.
And then next we have Ness from Earthbound, which I think clearly is a cipher.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that.
Edelgard from Fire Emblem, I think, would go in characters.
And I wanted to loop back on Ness for a second. That's definitely another example where it is the three other party members that are way more strongly characterized. Pooh and Jeff and the girl whose name I can't remember. They all have like well-rounded personalities, and you know, Ness. Man, it's weird because at the beginning of the game, like, it asks you what your favorite food is, and then it makes that Ness's favorite food.
Paula.
Like, the game is very. What's that?
Paula.
Paula. Thank you. It's interesting the way Earthbound like expressly makes you Ness. It'll say things like your dad is calling. And it's like my dad or Ness's dad. And obviously the game means Ness's dad, but it says you. The game makes you Ness.
Yeah, so I mean, it gets into that kind of like almost like gray area that we were talking about earlier, because it's like, yes, you are Ness, just like the same way that you and I are that Mudkip.
Yeah.
And so, like, yeah, like you're totally right that like Ness is as rich as you kind of like want him to be, right? Because it's an empty vessel in which you can put anything. So again, I think for sure a Cypher, but how he ends up like shaking out is to be determined.
It's so weird that it's not Ness is you, but you are Ness. Like it's just there's just like it's just a subtle little tweak that like the game is telling you that you are the character that's on the screen. It's not saying that the character on the screen represents you.
But that makes sense. Like when you think about, if you think of like Earthbound as a role playing game, right? That is true of like when we play D&D or something, where you are bringing some of yourself to that character, but it is a character in a unique situation who would not necessarily make choices you would make.
Yeah, I guess that's a fair point. There is still something weird about it I can't quite articulate. That feels different than playing like Dragon Quest, for example. That like knowing that you're taking on maybe it's just the like modern day setting, or the fact that I played Earthbound when I was a kid. So like I was Ness and Ness was me, and like the distinction between us was only that his world was weirder. Whereas like when I play Dragon Quest, maybe that character has a name, maybe it doesn't, but like he's a knight fighting drakes and slimes and stuff. Ness, the closeness with which the player is Ness is very interesting to me.
So next up we have we did Edelgard, Fire Emblem. Next up we have Matthew from Golden Sun, which is a game I have not played, but I understand him to be a like a silent protagonist.
Yeah, much in the same vein as, or even more so than Isaac, right? Like that. So I think Matthew's got to go into the Cypher category.
Yeah, makes sense to me. And so next we come to Andy from Advance Wars,
who I think we established earlier is a character.
Okay. And then Shulk from Xenoblade, and I think this is another one that we have established is a character.
Yeah, and very pointedly is not a silent protagonist. Literally speaks, which is a rarity in Nintendo RPGs. So okay, this is good. Under the heading of characters, we have Edelgard, we have Mallow, we have Pikachu, we have Oichi and Jigglypuff, we have Andy and Shulk, and then in the Cypher category, we have Paper Mario, Mario and Luigi, Ness, and Matthew. Now, I think generally speaking, I feel that these Cyphers are lesser characters, but I don't know if I'm going to hold to that. There may be some Cyphers that creep up the list just because I'm fond of them.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. But to me, I think a good place to start is, like, I would say, like, we assume that Cypher is at the bottom and we rank those. And then when we rank, and then maybe we rank characters, and where the two will start to, like, intermingle is at the top of Cypher and the bottom of characters.
100%. So, okay. Cyphers, Paper Mario, Mario and Luigi, Ness, and Matthew.
So I think Matthew's going to be at the bottom here for me, just because purely it's, my own ignorance. I don't know Matthew. I don't like Matthew. like I don't really have any. I shouldn't say I don't like him.
Matthew.
I have no feelings about him one way or the other.
Yeah. And I think that is fair, and also about where I land with him too. Also, I've mentioned on this show a couple times that I don't really like Golden Sun as an RPG series. I've tried it a couple times. I've got it on my I have the game GBA card, and then I also have it on my Wii U. And every time I try to get into it, the games are slow. They're sort of ugly, and like I don't quite get why people are so gung ho about the series. So, and a failing of mine, I didn't play it when I was 14. I'm sure if I did, I would be, saying how good a character Mallow is, right? But yeah, so I will back that and say that Matthew representing Golden Sun goes at the bottom of this list for me as well.
And just so I'm backing this up with something that is not just my complete ignorance on the series, I think we've talked about viewing these characters as characters and letting that kind of guide our ranking. But I think also if we're talking about like the greatest Nintendo RPG character of all time, you're looking at this list and it's like Matthew just doesn't have the cultural impact that any of these other characters do.
Yeah, totally. All right, so then who do we think goes right above that?
So this is difficult for me because after you were talking about Ness and just like I feel weird having.
I was talking a circle around Ness. That's right.
I feel weird. Initially, I probably would have said like, of course, Ness goes below Paper Mario or Mario and Luigi, but I don't know that that's true. I think I'm kind of leaning on your guidance here because I haven't played any of the Mario and Luigi games, but my initial thought is like Ness is maybe the top of the Cypher list, and then like Paper Mario and Mario and Luigi are they follow, and I'm not sure in what order.
So I'm actually not sure that I think Ness is a better character than Paper Mario. Paper Mario is very expressive in a way that Ness frequently isn't. Like even if you have a hard time sort of articulating what Paper Mario's personality is, he is always emoting, right? It is a very expressive, a very emotional character. He's like a silent Mickey Mouse, and like simplifying Mario's design for the Paper Mario does a lot to make him just like a more appealing character. But I do think that the next on the list, like next closest to the bottom, is Mario and Luigi as they appear in the Mario and Luigi games.
Yeah, I'm again out of ignorance a little bit, but I'm okay with that placement. In comparison, and we've talked about it a little bit, but just like in comparison to Paper Mario, why do you put them there? Just because they are like less expressive?
Yeah, because they're less expressive, and as I am, and this is a thing that is happening to me recently, so it is definitely informing my opinion here. But as I'm playing Bowser's Inside Story, the game is more fun when you're controlling Bowser. He gets all the big showstopper moments. He has a personality. He's driven by like an insatiable hunger. He wants power. He wants his castle back. And I can't tell you what Mario and Luigi want. Like they want to like, why are they helping Bowser, right? Like, it's the struggle in that game is between Fawful and Bowser and not between the Mario brothers and anyone else. So like the fact that they're able to be sidelined so completely in their own game makes me think that they don't really deserve to be any higher up on this list.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me. So right now it sounds like we're going Matthew at the bottom, followed by Mario and Luigi, and then Ness, and then Paper Mario. I do think it's interesting to have like Paper Mario and Ness up there at the top because they're two very different types of RPG characters. Like Paper Mario, there is none of that like I'm going to put myself into this character's shoes and like live a life that I will never live, right? You're not really like making meaningful choices in any of the Paper Mario game. Everything just kind of like happening as it happens. Whereas Ness is, like the kind of hook of it, like you were saying, is that you are Ness.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, and that like Ness is also like leveled and grown. It like grows in a way that you have a lot of like agency over. You make decisions about what weapons to equip, and all kinds of things. The Paper Mario series is such a simplified version of an RPG that like the character doesn't grow in quite the same way. I may be starting to talk myself out of this, that maybe Ness should be above Paper Mario.
Yeah, I don't know exactly where it lands either, because do think that you have a really good point that like Paper Mario is way more um like expressive, right? Like
Yeah.
he's more likable. Um it's just like how your avatar in like the Pokemon games like is not really likable. Like they stare blankly at everything, right? They're kind of like pod people. And
Yeah.
that does have an effect on how like how like attached you can be to them.
Yeah. Okay. Well, is this something that we need to put aside for now and revisit in a little bit?
I think so, because I think characters is going to be interesting, and I don't know. I mean, even just like right offhand, like, and again, this is ignorance, but like Oichi and Jigglypuff, like, do I like them more than I like Ness or Paper Mario? And the answer is probably no.
Right. Yeah, and I agree with that as well. Which is why I was saying that there probably are some places here where the characters will slip below the ciphers.
Yeah.
But I think right now we've got like a good division in that like we know that Paper Mario and Ness are good ciphers and Mario and Luigi and Matthew are bad.
Yep.
Basically.
Yeah.
Um okay, well let's address Oichi and Jigglypuff, and I also want to throw Andy into the same mix here. Um, not quite for the same reasons. Like I have a little bit firmer grasp on Andy's personality, but kind of by virtue of him being like a kind of a kid, he's a little obnoxious. He's got some of that like short round syndrome of like I use it as a positive earlier, but like you're a child in a clearly adult scenario, which just like strains the not that any of these games are credible, but like strains the credibility of like his role in the Red Star Army.
Well, I also think that as much as I absolutely like have fondness for those like really fun kind of like simple meat and potato anime tropes, um it doesn't make for particularly like rich characters, right? It's a very like Saturday morning cartoon approach to characterization.
Yeah,
And so in that way it's like they do belong in that like Paper Mario, for the most part. Like they belong in that Paper Mario, like they're very reactive and they're very colorful, and but I don't know how much there is beyond that, um where yeah.
yeah. Also, I misspoke earlier. Andy is in he's a CO in the Orange Stars, not the Red Stars. My bad. So I think that we are putting them sort of like near the bottom of the characters list, with Oichi and Jigglypuff at the very bottom and Andy right above that.
I think so, but we do have to talk about Pikachu, which is a character, if we are not talking about like Detective Pikachu, who does not talk and is basically like
Mm,
like basically a pet, a very like active and loyal pet, but still, like has limits to
right.
their agency.
And again, we should like re-emphasize, we are not talking about Ash's Pikachu. We are not talking about like the anime's Pikachu, because that's too vast of a character for us to try to fit into this here.
Yeah, so like really if you're breaking it down to just like a generic Pikachu that get in the tall grass, maybe down there with Matthew.
Oh boy. That's interesting. It's I hope we are making the right decision because we already threw out some Pokemon representation, and you and I are notoriously bad at considering Pokemon as part of like Nintendo's oeuvre.
Look, I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying like as a character, not as a mascot, not as the right, if we are talking about Ash's Pokemon, I do think that's totally different. I feel just like a generic Pokemon that you find, like, again, it's generic in the game. You can find them like all over the place, right?
You can find 2 of them.
Yeah, and they don't in the games. They don't have like a enormous amount of personality. They are like the Mickey Mouse of Pokemon, but like when people were posting videos of their campsites in Sword and Shield and seeing like all the Pokemon, the way that they would interact with each other, right? Like nobody was like, look how awesome Pikachu's interactions are. People were loving like the oddballs and like the weirdos, and Pikachu is not that.
Yeah, and I mean, we also mentioned that like in the Pokemon series, you are really playing not as the Pikachu but as the trainer, which we know to be a poor character, right? Like that is just, it's not even you, it's just a thing that moves around that enacts your will.
Yeah.
So okay, let's put the Pikachu down in the Cypher category with Matthew.
I will say, if we're using the same logic as we did for Matthew, where it's like, how does he represent Nintendo RPGs in general? Like, as a mascot, Pikachu's probably number 1.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great point.
So I think we put him down here for now, but I think there's little messiness in Cyphers that we're probably going to have to work out.
Yeah, deal with later. And that means that we leave open the possibility that Pikachu will rocket back all the way back up to number 1. That is in the cards. So that leaves us with probably in our top 3 the characters in some order: Edelgard from Fire Emblem Three Houses, Mallow from Super Mario RPG, and Shulk from Xenoblade Chronicles. Your initial thoughts here, Mark?
I think Shulk's position is right.
3rd.
Yeah. Like, I know that, there's this definitive edition coming out tomorrow, and that, like, he's represented in the series and him are represented in Smash Brothers, so that's raised his profile a lot. But I don't think that we can give Shulk too much credit.
Right. And certainly not yet. If perhaps we revisit, look, the last time that we reviewed all of our lists, we determined which lists were no longer definitive, and our Shulk placement at number 3, and I'm going to agree that's almost certainly where he's going to land, may be the thing that makes the list no longer definitive once we spend a little more time in the Xenoblade world. But I think right now, you're right. He's got to just come in behind Mallow and Edelgard. But then, Mallow v. Edelgard, what do you do?
This one I don't know, because they are both great in very different ways. Because like one of the things that's really interesting about Edelgard is like which house in Three Houses you play will your opinion of Edelgard and like the parts of Edelgard that you see like are very different.
Yeah, to the point where if most people playing the game will not consider her a hero character.
Right. But even like in the Blue Lions playthrough, right? Like you realize that she's definitely cast as like a villain, but the relationships between the characters is like pretty interesting. So it gives you like a little, maybe I'll say like a softer view of her a little bit. Or a different one if nothing else. Whereas like Mallow is more just like the traditional feel good, like in the sense that Mallow is like a force for good who has like a kind of like very traditional RPG story, and then chooses to like be the hero and like go with Mario to complete his quest. Like in that sense, he is the most like traditionally good RPG character, and for that reason could end up like being the like poster child that we choose here.
It is very interesting because Mallow, I think, is a more interesting character. I think his design is more bizarre. And his story, while being sort of an RPG trope, has some absolutely wild decorations on it. He thinks he's a frog, then he discovers that he's the prince of cloud people. Like, it's bizarre. But Edelgard is a much more grown up character. She's an adult character that adults can find interesting, and I don't know that that's necessarily true about Mallow.
For sure. I mean, Mallow is I mean, if you want to talk about like huggability factor, like Mallow, you want to wrap your arms around, right? And like Edelgard is a little more prickly. Like, that's just like who the character is. So it's like it's enshrining two very different like pieces of RPGs. Like you said, like one the more like child like wonder, and then the other one just more like for lack of a better term, like more like adult, multifaceted like RPG character.
What I also think, like, it is worth considering that Edelgard is frequently an unlikable character that I like, and Mallow is a likable character that I like. It's less of an impressive magic trick, right?
Totally. Like when we were talking about this and started to view everything through the lens of like strongest character, I think like Edelgard is the strongest character, especially because you have that like play through this like Rashomon like play through the story multiple times and you see like different points of view. Like, I think that added complexity is really interesting. I do think that there's so from that side, I think like the best character. From the side of like, does this character best represent Nintendo RPGs? I think that's a harder sell.
I think that's a harder sell, but not an impossible sell. Fire Emblem Three Houses was very popular. The biggest like Fire Emblem game, maybe Awakenings had a bigger impact among Nintendo fans, but like she is frequently the poster child for it. I know Dimitri and Claude are also like fan favorites, but she's got this like headpiece thing that's like horns. Like, she has a very graphic look to her in a way that is more like compelling and immediately like grabbing than a lot of the other Three Houses characters. And just by recency bias, Super Mario RPG came out in like 1996, or 95 or something. Super Mario RPG is an old game. Mallow is an old character.
But isn't that a point for Mallow? And look, we are old, and so the fact that we know who Mallow is maybe like not the best indication, but right, like there is something for staying power, and I know that that's a joke coming from somebody who, as soon as like I finished playing Breath of the Wild, I was like, this is the best game of all time, it's the best Zelda game of all time, it's the best RPG of all time. Right, so like I'm definitely guilty, and of like being enraptured by a game too early, but I do wonder that about Edelgard. Like, yeah, like Three Houses made an impact for sure, but like Awakening did when it came out, and in 5 years when we're talking about like great Fire Emblem characters,
great question. Yeah,
like will it be the same conversation right now? And I don't know that that's true.
This is fascinating because when now like we look back at this, it almost makes me feel like Paper Mario and Pikachu should be rescued from the depths of the Cypher category and brought up just by sheer like iconography, right? That like if we are picking a representative to be like, this is what Nintendo RPGs are and can be and what they look like, maybe they are way more impactful in their simplicity than Edelgard and Mallow are in their complexity.
And maybe like, yes, I'm completely on board with where you're going or what you're saying. But to that point, I wonder if Ness is also brought up. No, Ness is a little bit more difficult because right, like Earthbound did not sell super well. Like, it wasn't like a huge hit. It's like a cult game that really, in the same way that bringing Marth into Smash Brothers brought that game back into brought Fire Emblem to people's attention. Like, the introduction of Ness, I think, totally did the same thing. I can 100% tell you that, you know, most of the people I knew, it's like, who is this kid with the yo-yo? And so,
right. And why isn't it Mike Jones from Star Tropics?
right, the character on everybody's lips.
Absolutely.
And so it's like Earthbound and Ness do represent like another one of the, if we're talking about like, you know, the trinity of Nintendo RPGs, right? Like I think you have like Mario there, you have Pikachu for Pokemon, and then arguably you have Ness, because like Mother is niche, like super 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 niche, but it has grabbed people's attention, right? Like it represents an arm of Nintendo RPGism that isn't captured anywhere else on this list.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that is a really solid point. That like, yeah, it occupies a space beyond the game, right? In a way that I don't know the rest of these games or characters do. I guess outside of Pokemon. Pokemon is almost a video game second, you know? Pokemon maybe even third.
I mean, Pikachu is basically like the mascot of Japan for all intents and purposes at this point.
Do we need to disqualify the Pikachu?
Well, I think you're right that I think our list shifts a little bit. I think Andy and Oichi and Jigglypuff move down into the lower part of the list. And then I think it becomes like, maybe it becomes Matthew still at the bottom. Sorry, Matthew. Followed by Mario and Luigi, then Oichi and Jigglypuff, then Andy, and then Shulk potentially.
Okay. I'm just I'm making these changes in our list, and we'll see how we're doing there. So that's just above Andy.
I think so, because if we're talking like when we start to introduce like pure iconography to these characters, I do think that, and I think if we're talking about the greatest Nintendo RPG character of all time, we can't discount that entirely.
Yes, agree. So then, and also makes sense that we would let Shulk slide down quite a bit here.
Yeah.
Because right now it looks like we're putting him below Ness and Paper Mario. And then maybe Pikachu comes next. I understand Pikachu has like the ultimate iconography, greater than any of the rest of them, but I feel like the thing he stands for is too broad and too broadly not Nintendo RPGs specifically.
Totally, he's too good for it. Like Pikachu is way beyond like being the greatest Nintendo RPG character of all time.
Yeah. Yeah, but even so, even like coming to the contest and being like, I'm not going to compete, he comes in third. Which then brings us to our top two. We still have to decide Mallow v. Edelgard, which is the best.
I really don't know what to do here.
Before I was talking myself into Edelgard, but I don't know why. My brain has now switched over to, I think Mallow is the more iconic, the more heroic, like uniformly heroic, and the more just like, you know, capturing that weirdo Nintendo magic than Edelgard.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is that neither of them, yeah, we'll see with Edelgard, like people really, but like Mallow, you know, you show him to people, especially, you know, people who started playing games in the N64 or GameCube era, like nobody's gonna know who this weird Michelin man looking, you know, like marshmallow cloud thing is. So
and no one is calling for his inclusion in Smash Brothers, right?
Right, that's right. We chose even the least popular of like the weirdo Mario RPG characters. So I have to admit that is tripping me up a little bit with naming either of them like the best representation. But I do think that beyond iconography, like they are the best characters we have on this list.
Yeah, I agree with that. They are the best characters. They are the strongest characters. I can tell you what their personalities are. I can tell you what they want. I can tell you what they're afraid of. and they also both look cool. Like
yeah.
they fit that like that video game RPG just like exactly what I would want from a character, a hero in an RPG.
And I think maybe that's why I lean with you towards putting Mallow at the top here, because I feel like Mallow enshrines something about like the fun and optimism of Nintendo RPGs that I want this list to celebrate.
Yeah, and Edelgard does not do that.
Yeah.
Her story, even when she is the hero, is anything but fun. So yeah, that totally tracks for me. I think this may be our list. I'm gonna read it down from the bottom to the top, and then we can discuss if we need to make any changes. How many do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10. 10 RPGs, 10 RPG characters. Coming in at number 10, Matthew from Golden Sun, Dark Dawn. Number 9 is Mario and Luigi from Mario and Luigi. Number 8 is Oichi and Jigglypuff from Pokemon Conquest. Number 7 is Andy from Advance Wars. Number 6 is Shulk from Xenoblade Chronicles. Number 5 is Ness from Earthbound. Number 4 is Paper Mario from Paper Mario. Number 3 is Pikachu, barely even competing here and coming in at number 3. And number 2 is Edelgard from Fire Emblem. And number 1, the best Nintendo RPG character, is Mallow from Super Mario RPG.
And then Patrick and Mark as Mudkip are in a separate list where they are number 1 in a list of 1.
And also the last place at the same time.
I really like
Mark,
this.
I think this is our list. I don't think it needs revision at all. All right, let's close this out. Mark, I feel like there's room for debate on the decisions that we made. So I would love to hear what our listeners think here, and if they have any suggestions for how characters should be moved around, or if you just want to let us know that we nailed it, just email us a thumbs up, Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com. And thank you so much for listening to this episode. Remember, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. If you like the episode, you can share it wherever you share stuff. That helps us out a lot. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm at Patrick_Ellers. Mark is at MKE Mitchell. And the show is at Nin Cart Society. We also have a Facebook page, which is just Nintendo Cartridge Society. Olivia Duncan made our logo. Our theme music is provided by 8-Bit Betty. You can get more of his music by going to 8bitbetty.com or by listening right now. For my co-host, Mark Mitchell, and myself as a Mudkip, this is Patrick Ellers saying, thanks for listening.
That's right, Nintendo Cartridge Society listeners, what is going down?
Are you ready for a promo?
Let's do yoga. Let's get fit.
Hi, I'm Nick.
And I'm Muriel.
And we're the hosts of Hella in Your 30s.
A podcast about a cool couple trying to do adult stuff.
So each week we invite you to join us as we try to learn things we should probably already know, like how does a stock market work? Can we install that bidet? Why are all of our houseplants dying?
This is a podcast for people of all ages because remember,
age ain't nothing but a number.
But being hella in your 30s is a state of mind.
So tomorrow's a new day, let's order pizza.
Campfire.